I was born poor, although I did not know it at the time, of course. We lived in one room. There was 10 of us, myself, my father, my mother, and my 7 siblings. I didn't feel poor, you see, because most of the people around us were just as poor. Besides, I was never really hungry. That was to come later. The one thing I didn't like, though, were the toilets. About 50 people shared one shack. I don't know if anybody ever experienced these things. It's like a shack, it's outdoors. And they put the shack, you know those shacks. So I didn't like the shack for 2 reasons. For 2 reasons I didn't like the shacks. Because, they're outdoors, so there are holes in them. And there are all those neighborhood perverts who peep at young girls when you take baths. I mean, that's my reason, that's my excuse for still not liking showers or baths. I can bath in 2 minutes flat. Now, the other thing I didn't like, of course, was balancing, amongst all of that. Because people just never, in the toilet, they just never aimed it right. So you kind of like, which is, of course, also why my legs are very strong up until now, and I can do all sorts of balancing acts. Although I did fall down the stairs yesterday, so age. Anyway, I remember one house next door to ours. We were better off than them, you see, because they didn't have any toilets. So they did the very logical thing. They would shit in a polythene bag, and they would throw it across to the swamp at the end of the street. The thing about that swamp was that it was also our playground. Because, there were these migrating flamingos who used to come around, and we like to throw stones at them. So one day I was 6 and I was walking back from the playground, and our neighbor miscalculated on her swing. And the contents of her bag landed on my face. And so you can imagine a 6-year-old, I start crying for my sister. And then it got in my mouth, and it got in my nose, and it got... So what is the point of this shit story? Well, it always makes people laugh, but also it underscores how far I came. People ask me, so how did you get out of all of that? How did you become who you are today? And I say to them that we were poor, not stupid. My father ensured that I got an education, and it taught me my love for books and stories. The thing with stories is, if you read enough stories, it doesn't matter how bad your circumstances, you can imagine yourself out of that circumstance. You can be anywhere you want to be, and I've always been able to do that, which is why, of course, I went into the kind of profession I went into, because I always just wanted to tell people's stories. Strangely enough, people also wanted to tell me stories. Everywhere I go, people tell me stories. Auntie Funmi this, Auntie Funmi that, Auntie Funmi this. So for 8 years, I sat and I told people's stories as honorably as I could. It wasn't very easy. In those 8 years, I was censored, I was punished in very many ways, and this is not the time to talk about it. But last year, I had to shut down that very successful national TV talk show because I'd become weary of the unending censorship, the failed infrastructure. I mean, I can tell you how not to do television. And then, of course, there was the corporate corruption and deal making, whereby 80% of the decision is about, cronism and flesh or contact trading. Well, if you've had shit in your face that early in life, you don't want people giving you any more bullshit. So I stopped. But, because I'm an idiot, and because, the stories haunt me, I decided that I must go back to television. But this time around, of course, I got some people who were not aware of what they were getting into to go along with me. I got my co-producer, Chris Dada, who's there, for example, and one single angel investor to agree to support an audacious plan to travel around Nigeria filming as people talk to me. Now, if you know Nigeria, and particularly what Nigeria is today, you know it's mad to take a 30-man crew 4 of them white, around states of Nigeria. Do you know what you do with white people who wander in the wrong places and how much you can get for that? So, of course, the project is killing us. We haven't had a life since we started. But why do it? Why tell the stories? And why tell those stories the way we have decided that we must tell them? Because of her. And her. And them. The voices of the majority of my country haunt me. The voiceless majority never allowed to speak for themselves and of themselves. I remember when we were talking about it, I said to Chris, do you know, I've always wondered what, you know, what the cook, what she thinks, what the farmer, what he thinks, what his own issues are, the one who's living, you know, in the farthest forest in Yoruba land in Nigeria. So we started and we found incredible stories. We found stories, when Chika was talking earlier, I smiled. We found stories of a girl called Glory, for example, in Benin City, who was trafficked out of Benin to Italy, and the journey took 2 years. 2 years. You know, you have to see the series because the story, she told the stories and it was graduating horrors. Everything that could happen, some that you cannot imagine happened to that girl. And she got to Italy, she worked for 8 years, and just when she was going to pay off what she owed, she was deported, went back to Nigeria. The church accepted her. She met a man in church who forgot to marry her. And when she got pregnant, she found that he had given her AIDS. And so she has AIDS. Her 7-month-old baby has AIDS. But the thing about Glory is you could not pity Glory. How dare you pity her? You know, she was frail and fragile, but her voice is strong and powerful, and her spirit, you know, is unbound. And all she was asking was she just wanted to start all over again. She wanted to start her catering business. There's someone like Dame, who was paddling me through Makoko. I'll tell you more about Makoko later on. There are many people. Some of them are not poor people. There are all kinds of people in Nigeria. We know that. But I'm fascinated by those people who usually nobody ever sees. But, you know, I can go out. I've been doing it for years. I can go out and I can tell the stories. But how do we interpret the stories? For years, we've been talking about telling our own stories. Africans must tell their own stories. One of my pet projects, or pet dreams, is for a large African network where I could have seen Chika before now, you know, so that I could push Chika's book to all the millions of people in Africa who could read it and who can have their lives transformed by reading those stories. Anyway, so how do we interpret these stories when they begin to get told, as you know we are doing now? I'm going to read something that I found very interesting. Nigerians like to quote this man. I don't understand why. Lord Lugard, 1914 to 1919, the Governor General of Nigeria. And so he had this to say about Nigeria. Yeah, founding father. He said, in character and temperament, the typical African of this race type is a happy, thriftless, excitable person, lacking in self-control, discipline, and foresight, naturally courageous and naturally cautious and polite, full of personal vanity and little sense of veracity, fond of music and loving weapons as an Oriental loves jewelry. His thoughts are concentrated on the events and feelings of the moment, and he suffers little from the apprehension of the future or grief for the past. His mind is far nearer to the animal world than that of the European or Asiatic. That's what Lord Lugard said. And you know, one must forgive him, bloody old man. He spoke the wisdom of his time. His interpretation, no doubt, colored by an inflated sense of self, occasioned by the privilege of his life in Nigeria as Governor General. You know, but the thing that surprises me is the number of Nigerians who think he's right. Of course, they don't think it's right about them personally, but it's right about every other Nigerian. That's what they think. Now, let me play you something that I'd like you to interpret. This we filmed in Ajegunle. Ajegunle does not need any introduction. Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
Yes.
Can we lower the slide a bit?
Well, I can just turn it around. Thank you. It's very important, you know, interpretations. Chika also was talking about interpretations. I love that. You know, when I was listening to her, I said, that's my sister. Right. Now, to the uninformed interpreter, he might call those residents of, you know, Ajegunle one of Nigeria's most notorious urban slums. He might call we might call them grotesque, thoughtlessly fun-loving and uncaring about their future. That's if he doesn't know who they are and their stories. Let me tell you a little about that dance. It's called Alantan. Huh? Everybody does Alantan in Nigeria actually right now, and you actually need to pay quite a bit of money to learn to do that dance. Ajegunle was found on a swamp, you know, so one of the biggest problems there is mosquitoes. And one of the highest killers, of course, is malaria. And so that dance is sort of like poetry to their reality. So that's what they're doing, mosquitoes, you know, mosquitoes biting, and then they tell you have to sort of like make your face, you have to show the pain, which is why they do that, you know. That's what that dance is about. The thing about Ajegunle is that Ajegunle is home to some of the most hardworking, creative, ambitious, endlessly innovative, and resilient people you can encounter. In fact, the new explosion of the music scene in Nigeria started from Ajegunle. Their sense of self and belief in self is what the rappers, you know, the hip-hop artists have caught on to, and they're transforming. Also, some of the the earliest, most successful international footballers, you know, out of Nigeria came from AJCT. Yeah, so, but if you saw that video and you did not know all of that, you would wonder, you know, who are these people who just dance, who don't really, you know, you would think that. The ability to interpret our stories with honor and reimagine our future with hope is a skill we must seek. To foster this understanding, you know, when I talk about this, sometimes people ask me what I'm talking about, and maybe because I've had shit thrown in my face, and I'm an idealistic idiot. I know that if you focus on the very minute details of your lack, of your pain, of your want, you can excuse your state. But if you reimagine and reinterpret your reality, not as it is, but as it ought to be, you can transform your future. I have another video that I'd like to play.
If you what?
Right. When we filmed that particular one, it's a place called Makoko in Lagos. You know, when we arrived at Makoko, area boys descended on us, and they threatened to beat us and kidnap the crew and destroy our equipment. Maybe it was the fear, but you know, I just wanted to pee. So I asked them, please, to show me where the toilet was. And you know, maybe they were in shock too as to what's wrong with her. So they took me to the toilet. And I don't know how many people saw Slumdog Millionaire. It's exactly the same kind of toilets. So I did my business, and you know, I came out and we got on the canoe because that community is exclusively on water. And we spent the whole day with that community. Now let me tell you about the water you saw there. It's the dankest, I described it as the dankest, oiliest, dirtiest water you ever felt in your life. You see, the water has a life of its own. You feel it. You know, and as Dami, the canoe man, was paddling through the water, once in a while, you know, the canoe will slash through the water and the water will land on your flesh. And because you see, the water has a lot of things flowing through it, you know, mostly shit, you know, flowing through it. I mean, we describe it, when we talk about it, like my shit water sin, you know, you knew. The thing that I couldn't forget though was, you know, to get water, they piped water through, they put a pipe through that water to get to the soil. And you see, sometimes when the water is coming up, the pipe is broken, so the water from the lagoon, and so that's the water that they drink. So I was thinking, how can anybody live like this? You know, but through the day, as we talked to them and I collected their stories of triumph and failures and fears and, you know, successes, what I saw was their strength and their humanity and our commonality. I also felt a sense of shame that we could allow for that to happen. Now, there's one last picture that I'm going to show. Yeah, that picture. I wish I could have made it larger. It's very beautiful. If you saw a better resolution version of that picture, that little girl, you know, she's sitting on a canoe, and that's the water I was describing to you, and that's the community. But you know, if you look at that picture, that girl is sort of like a tiny bit of light in that darkness. By the time we finished filming that day, there was something that I realized. The school that you saw earlier, that school has no teachers, has no desks, has no benches, has nothing. But two of the boys in that community, young boys too, who themselves haven't got much education, volunteer to teach the children, 150 children every day. They go there, they teach the children. They are not paid a dime. I thought that those boys were heroes. And I thought that that's the beauty of reimagining every story that we tell. Because by the end of the day, some of the boys who came earlier, who wanted to beat us up, who wanted to break the equipment, I saw them transform before my eyes because they saw our intention. And what I saw when I looked at those boys, you know, were the confused and sidelined youth they truly are. And I saw all the decades of ruinous leaders, what they had done to those children, how those leaders have thrown shit in the face of those children. Now, if I sat and, you know, I just left the story like that and I didn't interpret it properly, it will be yet another seeming horror story from Africa. These are not people to be pitied. These are people who are viable, who are intelligent, who are courageous. This girl can be me. She can be Chika. She can be Audrey. She can be anybody. But the only way she can be any of that is if we reimagine our reality. Because I realize that oftentimes when Nigerians believed Lord Lugard, because sometimes, you know, we like to self-flagellate. We like to do this because when we do it, it also excuses. It gives us a leeway. We can escape responsibility towards the future. There's no going away. Talking about, you know, living in communities where there's shit in your face. You also like pop music. I love pop music. I like Niger hip-hop. But before Niger hip-hop, there was Michael Jackson, you know? And recently I went and saw that film, that highly promoted film, This Is It. And the part of it that, you know, there was a song that kept ringing in my ears. And it's that bit where they're doing, I can't sing for my life, you know. All I want to say is they don't really care about us, you know. And you know, they shot for the video, they shot against green screen, just 6 dancers. And by the time they produced the video, of course, they had simulated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people behind them. And I have always felt that what this girl is saying and what those boys who transformed before my eyes are saying, and all the other people who have had shit thrown in their faces, what they're saying recently, you know, quietly, they've been saying it for a long time. All I want to say is they don't really care about us. But recently, with the area boys, the prostitutes, the 419ers, the militants, the kidnappers, if you look at the level of crime that we have in Nigeria and how it's escalating, it shows getting louder. They are no longer saying, all I want to say is they don't really care about us. They're saying, all I want to say is they don't really care about us. And I see people marching. You know, it's all in my head, you see. It's still those stories. Okay, so the thing about that video is that all of a sudden, you know, the music stops. And I've always wondered, when the music stops for Nigeria and communities like that in Africa, what will be left? It is very important what stops it, and that's the music, and what comes next after the silence. The choice of whether it is strides towards a good society or anarchy, such as sub-Saharan Africa has never seen, lies in our hands, you and all of us. To be hopeful is not to be blinded to the challenges or fatalistic about its solutions. It is to consciously choose a better vision of ourselves, a vision of what ought to be for our children and our grandchildren, one that lights the fires within our bellies and illuminates our way into a brighter future. You see, because I'm an idealistic fool, I say this is my challenge to the next and the source of my inevitable hope. Thank you.